You know, there is a specific kind of silence that falls over a room when the person who thought they held all the cards suddenly realizes they aren't even playing the same game anymore. It's a heavy, suffocating silence, the kind that tastes like copper and regret. I am standing in the middle of what used to be Victoria Sterling's pristine, $60,000 chef's kitchen, the soles of my boots resting on imported Italian marble that cost more than my first car, listening to the hum of a Sub-Zero fridge that, as of 3 hours ago, legally belongs to me. This morning, this was the command center where the most feared woman in Oakwood Heights planned her daily campaigns of terror against the neighborhood. But now, the only sound is the crinkle of a court order in my calloused hand, a piece of paper stating that this 12-foot island, the professional-grade range, the entire master wing, and exactly half of her $750,000 McMansion are sitting on dirt that has my name on the deed. How does a retired master sergeant with a modest inheritance end up owning 50% of a miniature palace, you ask? It's simple, really. Victoria demanded a professional land survey to crush me over a mailbox she didn't like, and the surveyor came back with the punchline of the century, revealing that her castle sits 18 feet onto my land, 18 feet that swallowed her kitchen, her closet that's bigger than my old barracks, and the triple garage where her luxury sedan used to sit while she screamed at me about property values. The same woman who called me neighborhood trash just became my tenant. Rent is due on the 1st, so lock in, because the next few minutes are going to show you exactly how karma carries a tape measure, and she never, ever misses a shot. 3 months back, I buried Uncle Hank Miller and inherited his legacy, but what I didn't know was that I'd also inherited a war. Uncle Hank was a CB, 30 years in Navy construction, a man who could survey a property line with nothing but a piece of string and a grumpy attitude and nail it to the millimeter. His 1952 ranch house sat on Elm Street like a blue-collar middle finger to every stucco monstrosity that had sprung up around it, sporting original cedar siding, functional everything, and a lawn mowed with military precision every Saturday morning. Nothing fancy, just honest shelter that had delivered 43 years of silence to anyone who didn't like it. Cancer took him quick, leaving me a small cash sum, his tools, and a house worth maybe $250,000 in a neighborhood where teardowns were selling for 6 figures. But what he really left me was 43 years of refusing to kiss the ring of the new money that had invaded our zip code. Oakwood Heights used to be working-class cops, teachers, electricians who built things and raised kids who knew the value of a dollar. But gentrification creeps in like a slow rot. First came the lawyers buying fixer-uppers, then the real estate agents flipping ranches into fake chateaus, and suddenly property taxes tripled while HOA fees jumped from $50 to $300. Working families got priced out, replaced by people driving 6-figure cars who called themselves community stewards but acted like feudal lords. It was day 3 after the funeral. I was drowning in cardboard boxes and memories when the doorbell rang, delivering my welcome gift in the form of Victoria Sterling standing on Uncle Hank's porch like she owned the concrete beneath her heels. She was 50-something, dripping in salon highlights and arrogance, gripping a leather portfolio like it contained the nuclear launch codes. "You must be Hank's nephew," she said, introducing herself as the HOA president and lead agent for Prestige Realty, telling me we needed to discuss immediate compliance issues before handing me a violation notice on official letterhead with an embossed seal. The crime? Uncle Hank's basic black metal mailbox, a sturdy post that had been standing since the Eisenhower administration, apparently violated Section 4.7 of the updated covenants, which required earth-tone materials consistent with the neighborhood character, giving me 30 days to comply before daily $50 fines kicked in. "Ma'am," I told her, trying to keep the edge out of my voice, "that mailbox delivered mail before you hit middle school," but she just smiled that shark smile, telling me previous ownership doesn't supersede democratically established regulations, speaking in that hollow corporate dialect designed to crush resistance without offering a single ounce of humanity. Her house, 3 doors down, looked like a Tuscan villa had exploded, complete with a fake stone facade and decorative columns supporting nothing but her massive ego, while her mailbox was a hand-carved cedar monument with brass plates that probably cost more than Uncle Hank's pension. As soon as her car disappeared around the curve, I did what any soldier does when dropped into unknown terrain. I started gathering intelligence. Uncle Hank's basement office was command central, 40 years of meticulous record-keeping filed in metal cabinets containing mortgage papers, deeds, tax assessments, and utility easements, everything organized, labeled, and cross-referenced. Behind the water heater, I found a manila folder marked Property Lines, Important, Check if Trouble Starts, in his careful block lettering. Inside was the original 1952 subdivision survey, hand-drawn but engineer-precise, showing lot boundaries, setback requirements, and drainage easements, with specific measurements highlighted in yellow marker, numbers that made my combat engineer brain start asking dangerous questions about what was legal versus what was actually standing on the earth. I grabbed my tape measure and headed outside, measuring the distance from the property line to the street, checking side boundaries, and then the big question, the distance from my back fence to Victoria's foundation wall. The original survey showed a mandatory 22 feet between structures, but my tape told a different story, reading 19 feet, 8 inches, which wasn't a measurement error or the ground settling. It was construction that had blatantly ignored legal setback requirements. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria, a friendly reminder about the mailbox compliance, and I texted back, received, researching full compliance options, leaving out the part where I was researching a lot more than just mailbox codes. Back in the basement, I found a handwritten note clipped to the survey that read, 2019 construction questionable. Check setbacks if they push you around. Love, Hank. That first violation notice was just Victoria's opening move in what she thought would be a quick victory, a simple flex of power to bring the new guy to heel. But she had no idea she'd just started a chess match with someone who had spent 12 years learning how to demolish obstacles professionally. Sometimes, the best strategy against neighborhood bullies is giving them exactly what they think they want, especially when what they want is the very thing that will destroy them. 2 weeks later, Victoria escalated from mailbox violations to full-scale warfare, picking the worst possible battlefield for her ambush, the monthly Oakwood Heights Association meeting at the community center. Folding chairs were arranged like a tribunal, 23 homeowners pretending to care about landscaping standards, while Victoria held court from behind the head table like a judge with a real estate license. Next item on our agenda, she announced, consulting her leather-bound folder like it contained state secrets. Ongoing compliance violations at 847 Elm Street. And every head in the room swiveled toward me like I was a contagion. She clicked through a PowerPoint presentation on a borrowed projector, showing a photo of Uncle Hank's mailbox followed by before and after examples of cedar monuments costing $3,000 minimum, before dropping the hammer. Furthermore, she continued, warming up to her grand performance, recent inspection reveals additional potential violations, specifically fence placement which appears inconsistent with required setback standards. This was news to me, considering my fence had been standing since the 70s, but Victoria advanced to an aerial photo of my property with red arrows pointing at my back fence line, claiming preliminary measurements suggested encroachment into mandatory buffer zones. I stood up, explaining that the fence had been legal for 40 years and that my uncle maintained every code requirement. But her smile could have frozen antifreeze as she told me property standards evolve, and that what was acceptable in 1980 may not meet today's community enhancement requirements. The board motioned for an immediate professional survey requirement, stating the property owner, me, would bear the full cost of a licensed surveyor assessment to determine exact compliance status. 7 hands shot up immediately. Victoria's voting block locked and loaded, and the motion carried, giving me 30 days to provide licensed survey results or face escalated enforcement procedures. As the meeting broke up and neighbors filed out without making eye contact, typical suburbia where nobody wants problems, but everybody wants property values protected, Victoria approached me with that predator smile, handing me a business card for Rivers Surveying, telling me they were licensed, bonded, and very thorough, recommending I call soon before the daily fines began. As she walked away, heels clicking like a countdown timer, I realized Victoria had just made the biggest tactical error of her entitled life. She wanted a professional survey to destroy me, but what she was about to get was a professional survey that would dismantle everything she had built her kingdom on. That night, I sat in Uncle Hank's basement, staring at his property lines folder like it was a treasure map, the silence of the empty house pressing in on me. Victoria had handed me a $3,500 ultimatum, But my gut told me Uncle Hank had left me more than just old paper and good intentions. I spread the 1952 subdivision plat across his workbench, tracing the hand-drawn lines, the precise measurements, the official county recorder stamps, noticing for the first time the red ink notations in the margins, calculations that didn't match the official numbers. Beside Lot 847, my lot, was written actual survey 96.3 versus recorded 96.0. And beside Lot 849, Victoria's address, was the note, construction exceeds setback allowance by estimated 18 to 20 feet. My phone buzzed. It was Bobby Numbers Vasquez, my old Army buddy who now worked at the county assessor's office, a guy I'd shared enough foxholes with to trust with my life. I explained Victoria's survey ultimatum and her accusations about my fence, and Bobby whistled low, telling me I just described every veteran's suburban nightmare, promising to pull the permit histories for 849 Elm Street. Next, I called Sarah Jenkins, a property attorney and former Air Force JAG my VFW buddy recommended, who told me that these HOA bullies think legal threats scare everyone, but sometimes they scare the wrong person. If your property is clean and theirs isn't, she said, her voice sharp and intelligent, suddenly you're not the one with problems. But professional surveys cost serious money, so make sure you're prepared for whatever they reveal. That's when Uncle Hank's final gift revealed itself. Tucked behind the 1952 survey was a business card for his own post-military company, and below that, a handwritten note. Emergency Survey Fund, CD account 4471 at First National. Use only if they push too hard. Make them regret it. Love, Hank. The statement showed $22,000, enough for the most thorough survey in county history. Victoria wanted a professional survey, and she was about to get exactly what she asked for, paid for by the ghost of the man she had tormented for years. Old Man Rivers from Rivers Surveying arrived on a Tuesday morning that felt heavy with humidity and impending doom. Victoria had recommended him personally, assuming he'd find problems with my property, but she didn't expect I'd hired him to survey both properties simultaneously. I handed him Uncle Hank's emergency fund check without blinking, telling him money wasn't the issue, accuracy was, and that I needed documentation that would hold up in federal court. By noon, his assistant was driving stakes along my property lines, while Rivers himself focused on the critical measurement between my back fence and Victoria's house. This is interesting, Rivers muttered, checking his transit readings against the county plat, telling me my fence line was exactly where it should be, dead nuts accurate to the 1952 survey. Then he looked up at Victoria's looming McMansion with the expression of a man who had just discovered a bomb. The house is a problem, a big problem, he said, handing me his field notes. According to county records, the minimum setback from your property line is 22 feet, but this foundation sits 19 feet, 8 inches from your fence. He walked me to the stakes marking my actual property boundary and dropped the bombshell. Uncle Hank's fence isn't on the property line. It's 3 feet inside his own property, which means this house foundation sits 16 feet, 8 inches from your actual boundary. My brain started processing numbers like a targeting computer as Rivers estimated that approximately 18 feet of structure extended onto my property. Her kitchen, her master bedroom, her attached garage, roughly 40% of her total footprint. I asked about accuracy, and he told me it was survey-grade GPS laser transit, accurate to plus or minus 2 inches, confirming this wasn't a maybe situation, but a significant violation. By 3 in the afternoon, Rivers had completed documentation that included detailed plat maps, elevation certificates, photographic evidence, and GPS coordinates. Everything Victoria would need to understand that demanding this survey had just nuked her own existence. I asked Rivers what happens when someone builds across a property line, and he laid out the options. Boundary adjustment if both parties agree, purchase of the encroaching portion, or a forced sale of the entire property to resolve the encroachment, known as partition. I paid him and requested expedited delivery, knowing I was about to hand-deliver Victoria's destruction. That evening, Sarah Jenkins confirmed that 18 feet of encroachment wasn't a dispute, it was a property acquisition case, giving me clear grounds for adverse possession or forced partition. Thursday morning, I dropped the certified copies at Victoria's door, professional courtesy at its finest. Her lawyer, Preston Caldwell, called within 6 hours, blustering about harassment and intimidation, claiming the survey contained obvious errors they intended to challenge. I put him on speaker while brewing coffee in my kitchen, asking what his client's plan was for the 18 feet of her house sitting on my land, and was met with a silence so profound I could hear the clock ticking on his wall. By Friday, Victoria had gone full nuclear, calling an emergency HOA board meeting with only her inner circle invited, stacking the deck to plan her counterattack. I showed up anyway, reminding them that state law requires reasonable notice to affected property owners, and distributed copies of Rivers' certified plat maps to every board member. Victoria tried to claim the documents were fraudulent, screaming about harassment, but I played my ace card, revealing I'd already filed copies with the county recorder's office, making the measurements public record. The meeting ended with no action, her allies terrified for their own property lines, but Victoria wasn't finished. Sunday morning, I woke up to find surveyor scammer spray-painted in orange across my front door and my mailbox knocked over. Monday brought a formal complaint to the county zoning office alleging I'd bribed the surveyor, and Tuesday delivered a cease and desist letter from Caldwell's firm. But her biggest mistake came on Friday morning, when I heard power tools in my backyard and looked out to see a construction crew attacking my fence. I grabbed my phone and ran outside to find a crew leader cutting my posts, holding a work order signed by Victoria claiming the fence violated safety standards. I called the police, and Officer Mike Patterson, a Marine vet who lived 2 streets over, arrived to shut it down, warning the crew they were looking at felony property destruction. That's when the realization hit me. We had moved beyond neighbor disputes into criminal territory. Victoria was weaponizing every municipal department she could reach: code enforcement, environmental health, the fire marshal, trying to bury me in violations. But 12 years of service teaches you to document everything, and my property was squared away like a barracks for inspection, leaving every official empty-handed. Then came the turning point. Sarah Jenkins had been researching the 2019 building permits and discovered that the approved plans showed proper setback compliance, meaning the construction supervisor, Victoria's husband, Marcus Sterling, had deliberately moved the foundation 18 feet closer to my boundary to save money on a smaller lot footprint without filing amended plans. This wasn't an accident. It was intentional permit fraud. Sarah told me this strengthened our case enormously because courts treat intentional boundary violations with punitive damages, not just property value recovery. Victoria's escalation campaign had backfired. Her attacks on my surveyor confirmed the accuracy of our measurements, and her desperate tactics had revealed that her entire house was built on a lie. The petition hearing was set for a crisp October morning, the kind of day that feels like a new beginning or a sudden end, depending on which side of the V you're standing on. Walking into the county superior court felt less like a legal proceeding and more like stepping onto a battlefield where the ammunition was paper and the casualties were measured in square footage. Judge Margaret Foster presided, a woman with eyes like flint and a reputation for eating arrogant developers for breakfast. The courtroom was packed. Members of VFW Post 447 sat in the front row in dress uniforms, silent sentinels of support, alongside Elena Ross, the reporter who had broken the story of the HOA abuse, and half the neighborhood who had quietly suffered under Victoria's reign. Sarah Jenkins laid out our case with the precision of a surgical strike, presenting the 1952 plat, the 2019 permits, and Old Man Rivers' damning survey. Preston Caldwell, looking like a man trying to bail out the Titanic with a teaspoon, argued that his client had acted in good faith, blaming everything on surveying anomalies. But Sarah wasn't having it. She produced the construction notes from Marcus Sterling, proving the foundation shift was a deliberate choice to maximize lot usage, a choice made without a variance, without a permit, and completely outside the law. When Judge Foster asked Victoria directly if she had instructed the construction to move closer to the boundary, Victoria crumbled, whispering that she may have made suggestions about efficient space utilization. The silence that followed was absolute. Sarah then moved for the kill shot, petition by sale under state property law, arguing that since the encroachment was intentional, the entire property should be auctioned to satisfy the damages. Caldwell objected, shouting that this was an extreme remedy, but Sarah reminded the court that we had offered to sell the land, and Victoria had insulted us with a lowball offer of 25 grand for $300,000 worth of real estate. Then came the nuke. Sarah revealed to the judge that Marcus Sterling was currently under federal indictment for contractor fraud on multiple other projects, implying that Victoria's house might be evidence in a criminal proceeding. The color drained from Victoria's face so fast I thought she might faint right there on the stand. Judge Foster, looking like she had just smelled something rotten, ordered an immediate resolution. Victoria had 30 days to purchase my land at independent appraisal value plus legal fees and penalties, or the court would order the auction of her entire estate. 30 days later, on a rainy Tuesday, I sat in Sarah's conference room as a certified bank draft for $357,000 slid across the mahogany table. It was more money than Uncle Hank had saved in a lifetime, funded by a second mortgage that turned Victoria's dream home into a 15-year financial prison. But as I looked at the check, I knew money wasn't enough. One more condition, I said, stopping the pens from hitting the paper. I demanded Victoria resign from the HOA board immediately and publicly support the nomination of Gunny Henderson, a Vietnam vet and retired contractor, as her replacement. She looked at her expensive lawyers, begging for an out, but they had nothing left to give her. She signed. Gunny Henderson won the special election in a landslide, and his first act was to establish the Hank Miller Veterans Assistance Fund, with the bulk of my settlement money, creating a war chest to help other military families fight HOA overreach. Today, Oakwood Heights is different. The fear is gone. Victoria sold the house 6 months later, unable to bear the social isolation, selling it to a young Marine family for exactly what she owed. I'm in the backyard now, grilling burgers for the annual neighborhood barbecue, watching kids play on the lawn that caused a war. Uncle Hank's old black mailbox is still standing out front, a little rusted but unbowed, a reminder that property lines are more than just geometry. They're about respect. But it leaves you wondering, doesn't it? I took half her house, I took her money, and I destroyed her reputation. Some might say it was too much, that I should have just taken the first settlement and walked away. But when someone tries to bulldoze your life using rules they think don't apply to them, is there really such a thing as too much justice? You tell me. Because from where I'm standing, looking at a neighborhood that finally feels like home, it feels like the scales are finally balanced. Stay safe, know your boundaries, and never, ever let them move the line.